Good morning and welcome to Across the Pitch. We're the soccer show for people who think the Atlanta Falcons are the football team that plays at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Now, the Atlanta Falcons are the American football team that plays at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But today, we welcome an extra special guest to talk with us about the only championship football team that plays at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And that would, of course, be the Association Football Club Atlanta United FC. We're very excited to welcome the voice of Atlanta United FC, Kevin Egan, to the show as our very first guest on Season 2. Good morning and welcome to Across the Pitch. We have an extra special guest with us here today. We have Atlanta United broadcaster Kevin Egan coming to talk to us here about our Team of the Month. Welcome to the show and thanks for coming on. Kevin, how are you doing this morning?
What a great pleasure. Thanks so much, Phil, for having me on. I'm doing really well and excited to talk to you about the MLS champions.
Atlanta is our Team of the Month here for July, and like you mentioned, they are the champions from last year, and yeah, it's an honor to have you on the show, and as the voice of Atlanta United, you have had quite a career. You've done the U.S. national team, you've done the Premier League over in Europe, and just reported on soccer all over the world. But before Atlanta, you were covering Chicago. So tell us a little bit about how the soccer culture differs between Atlanta and Chicago.
Well, I think to answer that question appropriately, I think we need to go back a little bit. Chicago was born in 1997. The Chicago Fire kicked the ball for the first time in 1998. And I think that the game and Major League Soccer was absolutely different back then. Totally different. And Chicago hit the ground running. We won a double in its first season in 1998, MLS and the Open Cup, and had tremendous success early on. And there was a huge fan base there, great players like Cuauhtemoc Blanco and Peter Novak. So the fans got out and supported the team at Soldier Field. And then the move happened where Chicago Fire moved to Bridgeview, Illinois. And it seemed like the right idea for them at the time. They felt they could build up the Bridgeview area around that team. And with that move, I think you saw a lack of investment in the team as well. The star player wasn't coming to Chicago anymore shortly after that. And the results show. I mean, Chicago Fire have dwindled away from importance within the city of Chicago, unfortunately. And it's a wonderful sports town. You know, my mother's from Chicago. My grandmother's still there. And my brother lives there. You know, you talk about the baseball with the Cubs and the Sox, the Bears, the Blackhawks, the Bulls. It's a competitive sports market. And Chicago, for me, hasn't done enough, the Fire, to put their footprint on the sports landscape and stay relevant within the community. So right now, you have a team that's identity is being questioned, you know, whether new owners are going to change the name of the club, whether they're going to be moved back to Soldier Field. I would hate for them to take away the name because I think the Chicago Fire means something that's so important.
It's one of those iconic names in American soccer. Like you said, I mean, they've been around 22 years now, and it's just one of those team names that even if people aren't huge MLS fans, they know that name, Chicago Fire.
Yeah, and I think, Phil, you know, I think it's a brilliant point you make, and people question whether the team should be named after a disaster where a lot of people died. But the team name comes about, you know, from an incident that brought about solidarity and fortitude. And it made sure that the hardworking people of Chicago rebuilt the city into the beautiful city that it is today. And it's a tremendous story for Chicago. So I like the name, the Chicago Fire. And I think that the Chicago people are very proud of how the city responded after the Great Chicago Fire. So I would like to see the Chicago Fire become a lot more relevant again. And with that, the change of venue is a must. I don't think the name is the most important thing at all. I think get into the city of Chicago, be relevant in the communities. And that there is, going back to your question about Atlanta United, is one of the big differences between the two teams. I went for a stroll, and I'm now living in Atlanta just about a week and a half. Boxes still all over the apartment. We're in the midst of the move still, I feel. But I went for a walk with my 7-month-old son a few days ago, and I could not get over the amount of Atlanta United flags standing tall outside residents' homes. and the importance of Atlanta United in this city. It's right up there alongside the Falcons, right up there alongside the Braves. And it shows in the TV ratings, quite honestly. The local TV ratings compared to the Braves and the Hawks on Fox Sports South do really well. So I absolutely applaud Darren Eales, certainly owner Arthur Blank, for the way they approached this from the get-go. And they came into MLS at a time when MLS was starting to become a little bit sexier, a little bit more popular, and Atlanta United just brought that to a new level completely with the stadium, with the kits are really cool. And then you bring in the celebrity factor in town, the fact that you have, whether it's rappers or country singers, you have every ethnicity going to watch the games. It's a beautiful thing. Diversity is alive and well in Atlanta, and I think you can see that at Atlanta United games too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just blown away by what I'm seeing in Atlanta, and that actually kind of leads into the next question we were going to talk about. And just to kind of circle back to what you were saying about the Atlanta United flags at the yards. Here in Phoenix, we actually have the USL Phoenix Rising, who are doing very well. And it's not so much the flags here, but we have the car magnets, and it's just starting to get to the point where when you drive around town here, you'll see as many magnets for Phoenix Rising as you will for the Suns or the Diamondbacks or any of those teams. And it's really exciting to see the culture growing here as well. But what I'm going towards is, so now you guys are getting in right around 55,000 fans a game this year, which is about 15,000 more than Seattle, which is the second most. Now, obviously, you have the seats to fill, which, going back to how you were mentioning, when Chicago was in Soldier Field, do you think it's really just a matter of having the seats and having a good team? Or what do you think the other things that Arthur Blank and the club have done to really grow that culture and catch on in just 3 years?
Well, from the beginning, Darren Eales, the president of the club, was out there in the communities. He made himself very popular amongst the entire city of Atlanta, and he invested, and the club invested a lot of money in local communities inside the Atlanta perimeter and outside in the suburbs as well. So the team connected with youth soccer very, very quickly before a ball was even kicked in Major League Soccer. And that's one advantage that Atlanta United had, was they had quite a build-up, from when they were first granted an MLS franchise to when they kicked the ball in a few years. So there's that. I don't think it's just the seats in the stadium. Honestly, I don't. I think a lot has to click and has to happen for people to invest their hard-earned money and put their bums on seats at a stadium. The product has to be there. That was there with Tata Martino, Miguel Almiron, Joseph Martinez. The first season was exciting. Second season went to a new level, and every single fan inside the stadium loved their experience there, and fans outside from other sports were trying to go and see an Atlanta United game. Then you go inside the stadium, Phil, and you've got, a hot dog for $1.50. You've got a slice of pizza, a big slice of pizza for $2. You've got affordable food and a fan experience and an engagement from the club to make sure that you're smiling when you leave that stadium, and you can go there with a family and spend money on food and not feel like you're being ripped off at a stadium. There's those small little details from Arthur Blank and Darren Eales that have gone an awful long way with making sure that the stadium's packed.
Well, that's what we really like to hear, and here on the show, we're actually big on Accrington Stanley and Andy Holt. He's a guy over in Accrington that really believes in that same philosophy with the low price concessions and things like that. And of course, here in Phoenix, we have our famous dollar beer nights, and it really does make a difference because, I'm a huge baseball fan myself, but if I'm going to go to a Diamondbacks game, I've got to pay $30 to get through the door for the cheapest ticket, $100 if I want to sit down low. And then, you get in, it's $10 for a beer, $10 for a slice of pizza. And just having that affordability factor, especially with the concessions and making it so that families or working class people can go to a game, I think that's really the future of getting buns in the seats in America, because, there is, like you said, just so much competition for the entertainment dollar.
Yeah, that's exactly it. My dad was at the Atlanta United New England Revolution game last year, and he said to me afterwards, and it was probably 8,000 people at the game, and he said to me afterwards, it was a hot day, I went up to get a beer, and the beer was about $12 or $13. And you're thinking, how does that make sense? How does that make the fan want to come back? It's just such a small thing. Obviously, you're there for the soccer. You're there for the entertainment on the pitch. However, those small little details that make you feel welcome. A dollar beer night in Phoenix. I did not know you guys do that. That's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, they're actually doing 6 of them this year, and it's gotten to be a famous thing that they've been doing for 3 seasons now. And the team is now 12-0 on dollar beer night, so it's gotten to be a bit of a good luck charm around here. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like you said, a $12 beer. Well, I could sit down at home and buy a 12-pack for $12 and watch the game on TV, or I could go to the game and have one beer for that price. And like you said, I mean, not even just beer, being able to afford a hot dog or a slice of pizza. You come to a game, you're going to get hungry, and that type of thing is what makes, if you have a choice between going to game A and game B, well, I can afford to get a hot dog at this one, I'm going to go to this one type of thing,
Yeah, exactly. And then you factor in parking, you factor in all sorts of other things when you compare Chicago and Atlanta. And I had the experience of jumping on a train at the MARTA here in Atlanta the other day, and I went to my first game as a fan, and I can't tell you the last time I went to a game as a fan, Phil. Because you're working at the games, you're constantly in the broadcast mode, that you don't soak in what the fan experience is, whether it be jumping on the local train to take a ride to the stadium, having a beer with your friends, tailgating before the game, singing the songs, being involved with every single kick of the ball during a game. I loved every second of it. Every second of it, I lapped it up, I enjoyed it, and I took the train in. It was just such an easy thing to do. Mercedes-Benz is situated right downtown in Atlanta, next to CNN Center, and it's easy to get to.
Yeah, that is such a big thing, because if you're at a spot where, you've got to pay $20 for parking, or there's, a traffic jam, you're sitting to get there. I mean, all these things could deter people from actually coming out to the game. And then, at the end of the day, the biggest thing is the product you guys have put on the field. Now, you're sitting second in the Eastern Conference right now, which is the same place that you finished last year. How would you say that the play on the field this year has compared to what you saw last year?
It's been different. There's been a transition phase, a teething phase under Frank de Boer. The start was slow, and that was expected in my mind, because Frank de Boer is a new manager. He thinks, he thinks defense first, solidarity at the back first. And then go and play and keep the ball, and he's not as direct as Tata Martino was. He's not as aggressive in the press as Tata Martino was, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Atlanta United have broken records this season, went 5 games while winning without conceding a single goal. In their last 2 games, they scored 5 against Houston, 2 against DC, again without conceding a single goal. Now, they went through a rough patch at the back recently too, where they conceded 5 in Chicago. But I think they've turned things around of late, and it's just a different feel altogether, different personalities. Tata was nearly the older grandfather, the lovable guy who was a little bit more laid back at training, whereas Frank de Boer, he's the professional player who had a legendary career, and he expects players to rise up and have the same standards as he has. So it's a little bit of a different feel, but I like what I'm seeing lately, and I love the fact that Frank de Boer feels that he can throw youth in and give a chance to a Miles Robinson, who was not, I don't want to say snubbed, but he wasn't given a fair chance under Tata Martino. Now, here's a young player from Massachusetts who's going to be a feature in the U.S. men's national team going forward. He's had a tremendous season so far. Dion Pereira has impressed when he's been given a chance. Brandon Vasquez has scored a couple of goals this season. There's young guys getting a chance under Frank de Boer, something we saw at Ajax when he won 4 straight Eredivisie titles. So I think things are slowly but surely turning around, and I hope so. Atlanta United is primed. They're in a good position right now, Phil. And when you look at the Eastern Conference, nobody seems to want to win it. Teams are slipping up left, right, and centre, and it's there for the taking.
Yeah, and in terms of teams in the East, you have a plus 10 goal difference, which is the tied for best of the conference. And like you said, it really has been a progression. I I remember early in the season, I watched your away game against DC United, and then I watched the home game that you played against DC United on Sunday, and obviously quite a few in between. And it has really been a progression where the team does seem to be coming together. I would say that maybe not quite as explosive on offense as you were last year, but certainly stronger on defense. The one thing that does have me concerned is the home road splits. And, certainly last year you guys kind of proved that you don't really need to win road games to win the cup. As somebody that watches the team, is the home road difference something that concerns you?
Yeah, I think you're spot on to point that out. The road form has been pretty poor of late, and Atlanta United, for me, have performed at times well enough to get good results. New York away, that's the Red Bulls. Real Salt Lake conceding the last kick of the game to lose the game. But then you look at the way they play, and that's one of the bigger differences in that Tata Martino's team were so incredibly aggressive. You turn over the ball, you try and win it back straight away. You go and hunt in packs, and you turn the ball over. And how many times did Atlanta United counterattack through possession or pounce and win the ball back higher up the field and punish teams while playing away from home last year? It happened an awful lot. Now you see the team retreat into not into a shell, but retreat into their system, remain compact. And I think with that, you don't have the speed of Miguel Almiron anymore. Pity Martinez is a different player. Tito Villalba has that direct speed, but Tito Villalba's been injured since getting kicked by Kamara Lawrence in the game against the Red Bulls a couple of months ago. So when you retreat back further and you've got your compact system in place, and then you add to that you don't have the direct speed of Miguel Almiron and Tito Villalba, it becomes very difficult to break a team down who's playing at home when you have to start from scratch again and they've got 10 men behind the ball. So it's been a different look for Atlanta United this season. I think they're still figuring out the road form. But it's got to be better, especially approaching the playoffs. And with the change in Major League Soccer's format this year, I think finishing first in the Eastern Conference is going to be such a plus, and the West, for whoever gets that place. Obviously, LAFC should take it in the West. In the East, it means you get a bye into the next round, and you avoid that one-game playoff, essentially, where it's a knockout game. So for Atlanta United, that road form, though, when you hit the playoffs, needs to be much better.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at, especially being able to avoid that knockout round and not have to play that game on the road, especially if you get into the point where you're finishing fifth or something like that could be a real problem. But you mentioned LAFC there, and you have an extremely big matchup coming up here tomorrow night against LAFC. That one is going to be at LA, so that's going to be probably the toughest test you're going to face all season. Are you going to be looking at this game as a gauge of where the team stands compared to the other top teams of the league?
Well, I think that's fair. I don't think you should shy away from that. It's a tough night game. It's a 10 p.m. Eastern game, so it's a late one for the players. And you think about the body and the physical demands of Major League Soccer players taking these big, huge trips. You're talking about a 3-hour time difference as well, and a long trip across to Los Angeles. But no excuses. And Frank de Boer and the players, Brad Guzan in particular, have not shied away from that. They will not use a schedule, and they will not use adverse conditions and elements as an excuse this season. And I think you go there now, the sensation around both teams has shifted drastically in the last week. You have LAFC, who've just been hammered by Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And you have Atlanta United, who put up 7 goals without conceding in their last 2 games. So all of a sudden, you've seen some form and improved attitude from Pity Martinez coming off the bench to make the difference against DC. And you see LAFC, who've been humbled by the LA Galaxy. So I just wonder how this game will start. The opening exchanges will be absolutely crucial, Phil. Early on in games, Atlanta United have been woeful. They've been slow to start, and they've conceded far too many goals in the first few minutes of games or in the last few minutes of games. And that focus against the best team in the league right now, and I will say that LAFC, the best team in the league right now, facing the champions of Major League Soccer, it's one that whets the appetite.
Oh, it really does. And I actually wrote a preview article about this game. And just looking at some of the numbers for LAFC, they're plus 35 on goal difference right now. 55 goals scored is the most in the league. 20 goals allowed is the fewest in the league. And then Carlos Vela, I mean, what can you say about him? 21 goals, 12 assists in 20 games so far. Now, you've got a guy in Joseph Martinez who set the record with 31 goals last year. And then you've got Vela who's got 21 now, kind of chasing that record. As you mentioned, the game last Friday, it ended up Zlatan 3, Vela 2. Do you think that this one's going to kind of end up where whoever gets the most goals between Martinez and Vela ends up the winner of this one?
I've never met a more competitive person in my life than Joseph Martinez, ever. And he is so incredibly hungry for goals. He gets so annoyed at his teammates when they don't put him in a position to succeed, whether it be in a game or even at training. If you were to play a game of chess against Joseph Martinez, he'd do everything in his power to beat you. I think Joseph Martinez is desperate to climb back and challenge Carlos Vela for this golden boot. Joseph, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's on 16 goals right now.
Yes.
And Zlatan is right there ahead of him, I believe, and then you've got Carlos Vela. This is a race. We've got ourselves a race because Vela's production, I know he scored 2 last week. Before that, it had slowed down a little bit. And this coming Friday's game, yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And the key for Joseph Martinez is Pity Martinez. He's the absolute key here because Miguel Almiron was that wonderful foil that would draw defenders away from Joseph. He would create space naturally to his through his direct approach and his speed, and he made those diagonal runs that would force centre-backs out of position. Joseph Martinez would feast on that space afforded to him. And he goes on and he hits big-time goals in the playoffs, and as you rightly mentioned, he scored 31 in the regular season, smashing the previous record that was 27 from Roy Lassiter, Wondolowski, and Bradley Roy Phillip. I think this Friday's game, it's highlighted, and in American sports, we love to highlight superstars in previews and say it's Joseph Martinez against Carlos Vela, but that's what it feels like tomorrow. It also feels like a huge test for Frank de Boer against the most impressive manager in the league this year in Bob Bradley.
Yeah, I mean, Joseph Martinez, since he came back from the Copa America, he's been on quite a run. If you count the U.S. Open Cup game, he's scored in 5 consecutive matches since coming back. He's scored in each of his last 4 MLS matches, 6 goals total in those games. So he really has gotten himself back into the race. And I think that, absolutely there's enough games left where he could maybe catch Vela and get that golden boot the way that he's playing. And you mentioned Pity Martinez. He had that huge game where he came in, like you said, last Sunday and scored a goal and then got the assist and really is turning into the player that everybody kind of expected him when he got out to get him this summer. What has impressed you the most about his play, and do you think that by the time the playoffs roll around that he'll be a guy who's ready to fill those shoes of Miguel Almiron?
In the game against Houston last week, Pity Martinez came off the bench. I had a good friend of mine at the game from Ireland, student of the game, and I spoke to him afterwards and I said, who impressed you the most? And he didn't know who Pity Martinez was, actually. And he said to me, the number 10, the guy who came off the bench. And I said, oh, interesting. Why? Because Pity didn't score, and he had a couple of frustrating moments where he turned the ball over. And he said his off-the-ball running, his sense of the game, his smell for the game, and the ability to free up space for other players, he really enjoyed what he saw from Pity Martinez. You don't win the South American Player of the Year for nothing. You don't take River Plate and be their main man, their star, the joy of being their number 10, the responsibility of being their number 10 for, Boca and River Plate, the biggest teams in South America. So he comes in with heavy weight in his shoulders, a big price tag of $15 million. He didn't settle very well, and he didn't settle quickly. It took him a while to get his wife and his daughter over to Atlanta. There's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes, and then you come into a team where he thought he was going to be managed by Tata Martino, and now you're managed by Frank de Boer, which is a completely different look and a different style of play for an attacking player. So it's taken him a little bit of time, but I think his attitude and his application on the field has improved of late, and I think you're starting to see results from him.
Yeah, I've been really impressed, especially over the last 5 games or so, what I've seen out of him. And I think that, yeah, he really is getting to that point where he's starting to live up to being the probably most well-known signing of the offseason in the MLS. Now, I know that you said that you're running a little bit short on time, so I did want to make sure that we for sure got to this question here, because I know this is something that I'm sure you want to talk about a little bit. And we first actually reached out to you after talking to our friend Callum Williams, the Minnesota United announcer. He had mentioned watching the Aston Villa promotion playoff game with you last year, and that yeah, you are a big Villain supporter. So first off, as a guy originally from Ireland, how did Aston Villa become your team? And secondly, what do you think about all these signings that they're making going into the Premier League season coming up?
Yeah, I think it's about 12 signings now for Dean Smith and Aston Villa. Signing of Douglas Luiz a little bit earlier on today from Man City is a good one. I think, when I go back to my childhood, I was obsessed with the game. I was always obsessed with the idea of television as well, and putting a show together. The idea of talking about sports for a living was something that I was thinking about when I was 5 and 6 years of age, my parents tell me. I loved the fact that, everybody supported Manchester United and Liverpool in Ireland, and I just didn't want to be the same. I just didn't want to support Aston Villa, or I didn't want to support a team that everybody's supporting already. And I thought to myself, why is nobody supporting Aston Villa, a team that had, at the time, 4 Irish internationals? Steve Staunton, Ray Houghton, Andy Townsend, and my favourite of all time, Paul McGrath. And they had this Irish connection, Aston Villa, and they had these beautiful jerseys with great colours. And I was such a young kid at the time, and I just started to kind of look at the team more and more. And it's crazy when you pick a team, and the team chose me in a way, in that I was a huge Irish international fan, and there's the guys playing for Villa. But the gradual love for the team started to grow, and if I'm absolutely honest, over the past 10 years, my love for the club has dwindled a little bit because of the way it's been managed. And it's been it's something supporters, I think, are afraid to talk about, because they're afraid that people will question your loyalty for a team. But the way Aston Villa has been run has been so incredibly lackluster. I don't blame certain fans for falling out of love. It's like having a relationship that you fall out of love with someone. Sometimes it happens over time and you don't expect it. And with Villa now, it's exciting all of a sudden. It's like there's that spark back again. They're in the Premier League, but it's not even the fact that they're in the Premier League, because last year was incredibly exciting because the way the team was playing under Dean Smith, the way the club was being run, the signings that were coming in, it just became exciting again. And I hope that Aston Villa can go to the Premier League and play the brand of football that Dean Smith wants to play and survive, most importantly.
Yeah, it was really exciting. We were following them very closely when they went on that 10-game run late in the season, and they seemed to be really going for it. I know that there was a situation where it was really very important for them to get back to the Premier League this year, because they were running out of some of the financial support that was coming in. So now that they've made it back, they seem to be doing all the right things to stay there, and certainly we're going to be rooting for them here this year, because they've kind of become one of our teams that we follow here on the show. But I really connect with what you said about when you become a fan of your childhood team, and then over the years mismanagement can kind of make you fall out of love with that team a bit, because that's really a position I'm at with the Phoenix Suns right now. And I don't know if you follow basketball at all, but if you do, I'm sure that you can probably understand that one. But yeah, and then when you do see, the new management come in and start doing the right things, it really it's exciting, and it can make you fall right back in love with that team that you were so disappointed with.
No, exactly right, and I hope that the Suns can turn it around for you, Phil.
Thank you. We need it. Hopefully, we're knocking on wood here that the new point guard Ricky Rubio they brought in, hopefully he'll at least get him to more than 19 wins this year. That'll be something. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, sure, Phil.
Okay, yeah, and once again, Kevin, I really, really appreciate you coming on and taking the time with us, and have really enjoyed our talk, and hope that we get to do it again in the future. But this will be the last time that we talk to you, with Atlanta being our team of the month, and when we do our team of the month interviews, the question that we always ask for the very last question of the show is, we have listeners all over the world, and especially talking in the MLS. We have a number of listeners in the UK who have an interest in the MLS, but maybe haven't picked a side yet. So tell our listeners abroad why they should pick Atlanta United to be their MLS side.
I was the host of a show called The Extra at beIN Sports for the last 3 years. And one day we decided to poll the entire company and ask them who their coolest top 5 teams in the world are. The coolest. I'll tell you the 5. At number 1, PSG came in at number 1. And this was about over a year ago. PSG winning in style. Neymar, Mbappe, Cavani, the Jordan kits, Leonardo DiCaprio, Beyonce attending games. You're in Paris. So many aspects of that team were just simply cool for younger people.
Right.
In at number 2 was Liverpool. Understandable. Number 3 was the US women's national team. Understandable. Number 4 was Manchester City. And I was absolutely stunned to see Atlanta United come in at number 5. And I asked so many people at beIN Sports who I'd never spoken to about Atlanta United, why? Why has this team from Major League Soccer been ranked number 5 for you guys? And a lot of you don't even watch the team, and a lot of you don't even watch Major League Soccer. And it was to do with whether it's the coolest stadium on the planet, Mercedes-Benz, the home of the Super Bowl. The owner, Arthur Blank, who's also with the Falcons, who invests in the team and sees it as an equal. The staff at Atlanta United, like Star Neils that they've heard about, but more importantly, the celeb factor, the kits, the golden spike before the game, the 70-something thousand people showing up that never sit down throughout an entire game, to the point that the TV directors cannot see a corner flag because everybody's standing, and they didn't plan for that when they were building the stadium. There's the concessions that make it easy to go and have a cheap beer and a cheap hot dog. There's the polarizing figure of the MVP, Joseph Martinez, and the electrifying football that this team has played since its inception. I think if you're abroad and you're looking to support a Major League Soccer team, you're not going to be let down. If you support Atlanta United, you're only going to see more and more games because the team is so good that they're going to make national television. My parents live in Ireland and Dublin, and they watch on Sky Atlanta United nearly every week because the team is on national TV, because it's popular and it's a great watch. So I would say absolutely, if you're trying to pick a team, Atlanta United is a fun one to go with.
Well, you certainly sold me. I mean, I already like Atlanta United, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just a fun team to watch, and I think, like you said, the way that Arthur Blank invests in the team, and it's certainly, being an American football fan and a guy that shops at Home Depot, I'm pretty familiar with Arthur Blank, so they've got all the right things going, and like you said, 70,000 fans at a game, you don't see that even at a Premier League game. That's just incredible.
Exactly right, you don't. And 15th place in the world in terms of attendance for a Major League Soccer side. It's now in its 3rd season. It's mighty impressive, and I'm just so happy and honoured to be a part of it all.
Absolutely, and we're honored to have you on the show here, Kevin, and thank you again for taking the time. And before we wrap up, I always like to ask if you had anything else that you wanted to say about the team, or just talk about it in general.
No, I think from day one, it's been such a pleasure to be asked to be the first ever TV commentator for Atlanta United. Was a remarkable honour. And from day one, honestly, it's been such a fun experience to work alongside Dan Gargan, who was a champion with the LA Galaxy, a fantastic up-and-coming analyst in the country, Gillian Sakovitz, who also works with Major League Soccer, and she's down on the sideline, and she's also a pre-game and post-game host, a wonderful person, great at her job. So I just feel that I'm very lucky to be in a position that I'm in, where I get to talk about a team that I love and a sport that I love for a living with wonderful people. It doesn't feel like a job, quite honestly. And I'm grateful for it, and I'm thankful for it each and every day.
I really appreciate you coming on once again, and hopefully maybe later in the season we can catch up again and maybe talk about a playoff run. And I'm really excited to hear you when I tune into the Atlanta games for the rest of the year here. And I think that my pick at the beginning of the kind of second half of the season, when me and my co-host were talking, was I said that I see a rematch of last year. I think it's going to be Atlanta and Portland in the final again. Do you have a prediction for the MLS Cup before we wrap up? This will be the last thing. Who's your prediction for the MLS Cup?
I think you're going to see it this Friday night. Atlanta United, LAFC.